Welcome to Mindless Entertainment. My name is Jesse Milestone. Yes, your God Empress is back. I know it's been a minute. I don't know how this even works anymore. I don't. Did I ever in the first place? I was like, I'm just gonna turn on the camera and talk. Oh wait, that's what I've always done. So yeah, I'm back. I had to come back because I got to see Dungeons and Dragons on Thursday night, even though the movie is still 2 weeks away from hitting the theaters globally. So I thought I should share some thoughts, some impressions with you about that, since not a lot of people have gotten to see it yet, and you might be curious. I mean, this is the latest in a round of nerd properties that have been swept up by Hollywood to be packaged in a different way and sold back to us, and in addition to the mainstream. So I want to know some things about it. So I ended up, this was the Collider preview that I ended up going to because a friend of mine had gotten on the list and was like, hey, I got a +1 for this. Do you want to come see Dungeons and Dragons tonight? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, there's a Q&A with the cast and the producer. And I'm like, yeah, I definitely want to come. So not only was there that, but there was a free, the ticket came with a free popcorn and drink, and there was a Q&A with the writers/directors at the end as well. So kudos to Collider for putting on a hell of a preview. That was a good job on them. That's yeah. But the movie itself, so again, it was a very positive experience. Now they want this to be positive. Everyone talked about shill. I'm not a shill for this movie or for Collider. They don't even know I was there. I was literally a +1. They don't even know who I came with. But they do make this a really nice experience, so you're set up to like the movie. Which here's your first. Well, it's not a spoiler. I liked it. I enjoyed the experience. I enjoyed the experience of watching the movie. I enjoyed a lot of things about it. I've been sitting on it for about a day, and I still have an overwhelming positive impression. So I wanted to share some of those impressions without spoilers of this film. That really, I don't know. It was. So let me give you some context. Let me give you some grounding. Let's talk about Hollywood today. Let's talk about the state of movies and fantasy today, right? Because it's important in where this movie comes. Because this movie, if in an objective bubble, this movie is fine. It's fine. It looks great at points, occasionally cheap, but not very. Because this is one of the great things about this movie. I will say this is something that is truly great about this movie. They really went ham on the practical effects. Now, the unfortunate part is that when it is CGI, you can definitely tell, because the CGI falls into sort of the same sameness that everything kind of has today, which is to say you can tell it's CGI. But the practical effects, holy crap. I mean, this is... I compare it to other parallel things that are coming out today with practical effects that look, cheaper. Mandalorian comes to mind with those cave people that looked Henson era, which is like Jim Henson was great for his time, but that's like 30 years ago now. These practical effects is what Jim Henson would have been dreaming the future would look like. Great monsters, great characters, beautifully visually done. And I will say, I will renege my CGI statement in one particular example. There was the big chonky dragon that makes this cameo in this movie looks pretty freaking cool and moves pretty freaking cool. So there's a little tidbits there. It's an attractive movie. It has a lot of visual references to a lot of other recognizable fantasy worlds. I mean, there's definitely a lot of Lord of the Rings feel in here. There's a pointed nod to Jurassic Park right up at the beginning, and they reused the set of King's Landing from Game of Thrones as one of their set pieces here. So there's a lot of there's a Colosseum that looks very gladiator, very ancient Rome. So there's a lot of pieces here, which, I mean, and this is, again, we got to consider what we're watching. We're watching a D&D movie, and we're watching Dungeons and Dragons, the movie. And so the fact that this movie looks like the come-to-life version of every fantasy world kind of trickled together is kind of what you want. And this is something I'll also say going into this, when we get into talking a little specifics and lore. I'm not a D&D person. I've never played it myself, actually. I have tons of friends who have. I know a lot about the kind of how it goes and stuff, but I don't really know the lore. I don't know the specifics. So while I can tell you that the fan service felt well-meaning and authentic, and I can also tell you that the directors/writers themselves are nerds, play D&D. They have these answers for you. They're coming from knowledge. I can't speak to whether or not the fan service feels organic or not. That's really kind of a personal personal journey. And that's really for everyone, I need to decide on their own. Now, this movie is replete with Easter eggs and things like that. So it's not without that. It's just up to you to decide whether the fan service feels, organic, authentic in the way you're looking for it, or if it feels, hollow and shallow. I don't know. Up to you. I liked it, like I said, but I missed probably 98% of the things that were very D&D specific about it. Now, that said, what I do know about D&D, like I said, is this fantasy, adventure style game that has elements of fantasy that really, it draws from a great well of fantasy. I know that all characters are supposed to have different classes and different classes of different traits. So those different traits sort of correspond to, personality types, things like that. And obviously you have, written statistics, numeric statistics, as well as your sort of more subjective personality elements. And this was really, really well reflected in your team, in the core, the group, the players, who the players would be, basically. You very clearly had your different cast. My favorite is Holga the Barbarian. She is great, and that's what's great about it too. It's like in true D&D fashion. I think this is what this movie gets right. It's not a woke film. There's nothing about this movie that really needs you to focus on anybody's race or character. It actually does the way fantasy's supposed to, where it puts any of its discussion about differences into allegory. It makes differences be about species, about a class, about race, not about skin color race, or about, like sexual orientation stuff. So it does that the way fantasy, I think, is supposed to. And what's cool is D&D is a very egalitarian kind of game. There's nothing that says a woman can't be a barbarian, but if she's a barbarian, she's gonna be a barbarian. She's gonna have barbarian traits. She's gonna fight like a barbarian. She's gonna act like a barbarian. She's gonna do barbarian things. You're not gonna have a girl being like, I want to play as the barbarian, but she's always gotta be perfect and pretty and like nothing ever goes wrong. Like, that's stupid. And so this character was really reflective of that. Michelle Rodriguez is badass and she's hot on top of it. So hooray, everybody wins. No, but I love that. I love she had such a great point of view. She was a barbarian, so she said barbaric things all over the fucking time, and everyone was always like, wow, don't say that, like, have some tact. And she didn't, because she was a barbarian. So, set up these nice running gags that are in line with these characters and their traits. But also you had things like, oh, we have a friend who's a wizard, but he's a terrible wizard. So, like, it reflects as, like, okay, this character isn't, like, has crappy stats. He's, like, a low level. He hasn't leveled up at all or whatever. I don't know if anything I'm saying even sounds right. Like I said, I get the gist. I don't know the specific. But yeah, so it really, yeah, it was fun. In those ways, and I could see how those elements, were there. You could see the moments. They even joked, the cast or the producer and stuff even joked about like the rest periods that they write, and they really try to write it so that it feels like an authentic adventure with characters you care about, but also that it feels like the pacing of a game, of a D&D campaign, and that pacing. I mean, let's talk about the pacing. This is a 2+ hour movie. This rings in over 2 hours and 10 minutes, I think closer to 2:20, and yet it does not feel like that. Oh my god, it does not feel like that. It really it reads like hour 40, hour 50, a nice regular movie just popping along at a healthy clip. That was something, even though you would not expect a man like Roger Ebert to have anything positive to say about a movie like this, even he said that it did not feel that. I took a peek at his review just to see what other people were saying, and even he agreed that the pacing, it's really, really well paced. It just flies along. It's fun. You're in the adventure. Nothing is too, gravitas deep, all of this stuff, but nothing is so fluffy and inconsequential that you lose your footing or lose your grounding, which I thought was special. You got to the end and there was a catharsis that happened that actually got me in the fifis a little bit. Now, I'm a fifis kind of person, so it's not that hard, but granted, I will say, this movie is following very much in the Marvel keep. This producer had produced several other Marvel movies, Jeremy Latcham, and so you've got to realize this is we're in this compendium of superhero-dom in a sense. Even though this is fantasy, it's still very much rooted in the zeitgeist, like movies today kind of have to be. There's a tongue-in-cheek tone to it. There's a meta element to it. All of these things are there, but I would say, like, compared to Ant-Man, which it feels very similar to, tonally, this big adventure of the week kind of feeling to it, even though it's just, I know it's one adventure, but it feels, neither of those movies feel like this adventure that they're having is like the adventure, oh my god, the timeline. It's the adventure of the week. It's, hey, this is what's happening to us today. So they having both those feelings. Like Ant-Man, I can barely tell you any of the details from that movie. I felt nothing watching it. Like, it was visually entertaining, it was fun, there were some jokes, but I just trotted along and then it was over and I forgot. This one, like, it had heart, it had some feeling, and it was funny. The jokes worked, the jokes were there, and they worked. They were told from the point of view of the characters, and that's why they worked. It was actually really fun listening to the directors talk about that afterwards and talk about the cutting down process. They said things very similar to what Lord and Miller said around Into the Spider-Verse coming out, which is talking about the way you get your best jokes is by sacrificing your second best jokes. You make your A material shine by cutting your B material. And so they talked about a couple of those ones. They talked about one joke that didn't make it, that made it to the cutting room floor, that we actually laughed at when they told it to us. But it was like, again, in service of the moment in the story, they needed to get on with things. And then they told us another one that they actually had to fight to keep in, and we all loved. And I'm like, man, but that moment needed a joke because it worked with the characters, it worked with the thing, and the joke they chose I thought was just, I don't know, it worked. I mean, there was a bunch of different options they could have gone with. It was one of those, they probably had Chris Pine ad-libbing a bunch, and that was like what stuck, and it was a little ridiculous, but it was just, I don't know, it was so well executed. I won't tell you exactly what it is, but it's when it's when a certain character does their, like, I must leave you now, and it's funny, it's good. So just know when you see that was like almost didn't make it. They bought the studio for that one, and it's great. So I like it's very effusive. What's bad about this movie? I mean, it's derivative. It's nothing you haven't seen before. I was calling a lot of the lines before they happen. I was calling a lot of the moments before they happen, which is good or bad, if depending on how you slice it. In the overall compendium of movies, it's not great when you know exactly what's going to happen right before it happens. But in the sense of today's movies, where ever since, thank you very much, Rian Johnson, we have assholes who think that subverting for the sake of subversion is a great way to deconstruct films. I mean, you can even take it to movies like Watchmen. It's deconstruction for the pure sake of deconstruction. They don't have anything else to say for themselves. So we get really insular. I mean, it's how Hollywood works today anyway. That's why there's so many Eat the Rich movies where all these supremely rich people are like priding themselves on their masochistic portrayal of how much they hate themselves. It's just very, very insular and like spinning, back in on itself in those ways. And so a lot of movies today are shit, like actively shitty. Like, this movie starts and then they'll like pump the brakes, 20 minutes of exposition for no reason, and then we'll get back to the action. But the action now requires new exposition because that exposition is all about what you need to know before the movie even started. So now you need to know more stuff to explain the action that you just saw for 2 seconds. So now it's like 40 fucking minutes of exposition and 2 minutes of action, and you're halfway through the goddamn movie. So that's what a lot of movies today feel like to me. It feels like this deconstruction of what movie making is. Hey, we understand that movie making is a good balance of exposition and action. We understand that it's a show don't tell medium and that dialogue is simply here to enhance the visuals. We don't understand that anymore. We've broken these things apart. We're like, how long can we milk a long stupid piece of dialogue? How confusing and illiterate can we make these fucking visuals? That's what movie making has become. So to watch something that's just gone back to being really derivative and exactly what you'd expect is refreshing. And that's the whole thing. I mean, there's some people who think that a movie that isn't great isn't good. There are other people that think that, a movie can just be fine and that's okay. And I miss when movies could just be fine. We'd have to delude ourselves into thinking that every movie was going to change the way we saw humanity or fix the identity crisis or something else or win an Oscar or change the way the world works. Like, no, sometimes movies can just be fine. They can just be funny, entertaining. They make you feel good for 2 hours and however many minutes, and then you go away. The end. And that's what this is. Fantasy lovers, I think you'll enjoy this. People who are into the cast, if you like Chris Pine, if you like Sophia Lillis, if you like Michelle Rodriguez, they put on great performances. They're wonderful. There's a lot of eye candy. There's a lot of humor. The things I appreciated too, and things they remarked on. Watching this movie, I felt, wow, it's really nice that they're doing these wide shots for the fight sequences so we can actually follow what's happening. And they talked about it at the end, how they don't like these super close-up shots, with all these quick cuts where you don't know what's happening. So I really did feel like there was a lot coming through from the intention of the directors, the writers, the cast, everybody. That intention, that love they felt for the film, shone through in certain ways clearly, because a lot of the things I'm thinking in my head that I appreciated about the movie were the exact things that the directors spoke back to me at the end. So this movie's not going to change your life. It's not going to change the way you see anything at all. But it's fun. It's fun. It's good. It's entertaining. The acting is good. The action is good. The story is good. It's basic. It's exactly what you'd expect. If you make a prediction at some point along the way that you think is going to pay off in one way or another, you'll probably be right. And you know what? Unlike today's movie-making world, it's sometimes gratifying to be right. God, I'm so sick of this is probably going to happen because that and that and that. And you're like, wow, you guys just chose to give me all that information and never pay it off. I don't feel subverted. I don't feel pleasantly surprised. I feel cheated. I feel gypped when I go through one of those experiences. So to just have a movie present itself as what it is, to tell me what it's going to be and to be that thing, I went into this thing thinking it was going to be hot, steaming dog shit, and you know what? It was not. That was his version of my expectation. I really thought this was going to suck. It didn't suck. It was fine. It was fine. It was fun. It was funny. I mean, again, there's some parts where the CGI looks cheap. Okay. And it's very predictable. Okay. I can't think of anything else really negative to say about it. It's nothing much more to gush, nothing much more to add, but that's it. You want a good time? You want to enjoy a little fantasy escapism for once in your life and not have to be brutalized with anything other than just a little bit of fantasy escapism? Go see Dungeons & Dragons Here Among Thieves. That's what it's there for. Yeah, and that's all I gotta say. So I hope you like this. If you did, share it with everyone you know. Watch it a zillion times. Leave it on repeat. All those great things. And catch me again when I decide that I want to make another video. Till next time, God Empress.